Today we're going to learn how to shade in watercolor using complementary colors. What's up friends, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in another video. Today I want to talk to you about shading in watercolor, and this is something I'm asked about quite often, and you do see the mentality or the mindset behind this when I publish the longer painting videos. And today I want to just focus a bit on 3 examples and show you how I approach shading and adding shadows and shades to each and every one of those using complementary colors and not colors of the same color group. Because what I find is that you can add shadows if you're painting like an apple. You can add red shadows which are the same color of the apple, but the problem is it's going to be a little boring. You're going to get things that look more like emojis than actually a nice painting. So in this video I want to show you how I do that step by step using 3 examples. We're going to have this thing going around reds, oranges and greens, and you'll see me using a complementary to shade each and every one of those. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and try to soak up the mindset behind this. And I promise I will make more videos on this topic, maybe even going a little more detailed on how I do this, okay? So this is what I attempted to be, at least as a quick demo. It's not something that I really go step by step like the Apple video or the full processes. It's just me showing you how the different colors work together. Of course, I could take my time more with these, so be minded of that. You can be a little more patient than I was in this video. So without further ado, let's change the angle and get started. Okay, so let's get started here, and the first dominant color we have is red. So what I'm gonna do is basically add a shadow here using green, okay? Because green will be the complementary that can darken red really well. Okay, now I'm not taking into consideration here necessarily the object itself. I'm kind of just thinking about it in terms of colors. Now, if you've seen my video on how to paint a simple apple, this is really just the same apple, but this time I'm simplifying things, okay? So I'm mixing here green using just yellow and some blue. This is a cool blue and a warm yellow. So I think that's good enough. And I'm just gonna lay it over this apple from top to bottom, just working my way around all of the shadows and shades and the areas that need it. Now I will, just to add some more interest, vary the wash a bit, perhaps using some blues near the bottom or something like this. And I'm really just following the shapes that I see. And so I'm gonna add a little bit more blue here just to create a little more interest, like this. If you want to really create interest, you can use purer colors, but anyway, I'm just cleaning the brush a bit, and I'm gonna blend just a little bit around here. I think this area needs a little more blending in. And going back to my pool of color here, and just pulling down the paint around the shapes of the shadows, okay? And hopefully you already start to see how this starts to come together and really create an interesting shadow, okay? If you really would just add the shadow using, you know, a darker red, it can get really boring. So this is why I recommend trying to use. I don't always think it's a good idea to shade using complementaries, but I do think it's a good idea to always think about when you can do that, okay? So sometimes you may discover that, just blend it all together. Sometimes you may discover that you can use a nice mix of the two, okay? And if you can do that, that's a good thing as well. It can really work out nicely. So now things get a little darker towards the bottom. I'm gonna just use pure blue to get that shadow in, so you can see how you don't have to just have everything green. And there's a shadow I forgot to put in. Well, I didn't forget, I just didn't get to it yet, around here, which is an important shadow. And shading all of this bottom part here. Now I could probably use a bit of a darker green for these areas, so that there will be an even stronger contrast. But you get the point of this, and hopefully you can really feel how the shape of the apple is starting to basically take place. I will add a bit more green, very dark green, to the stem here, just to add a bit of shadow underneath it, because it has a strong shadow there, and darken the base a bit as well. So now you can already see how this caught a nice shape, just using this green over the red. Okay, so let's move on to the next example, which will be our pumpkin. Okay, so the pumpkin is orange, and I believe the complementary to that will be something a little more purple-ish. So what I'm gonna do, and I don't really have a purple the way I want to, I'm gonna mix a bit of magenta, or something like this, quinacridone magenta, something similar to madder or rose here. And to that, I'm gonna add a bit of the same blue I used earlier. Okay, and hopefully that'll create a nice kind of violet or purple that will be a complementary to that. You can already see how these two work nicely together. Okay, so I'm just using these two colors to get it in. Probably could have used this red. I think it would even be better. So you know what? Let me use the Pyrrole Scarlet or something, or cadmium, something a little more of that nature, because these are the colors I used for the base orange. So I think this will be a better mix even, but it's a bit dead and muted, so we're gonna use a mix of these two. Okay, so I'm just gonna start making my way around the pumpkin, and I marked already the shadowy areas. Just gonna add a bit more water to the mixture. It's a little dark. And that way I'm just starting to work on all of those darker areas here. And you can see how these colors really work nicely together. Let's try and get more of the magenta here, and see how that works out. Maybe even purer magenta. You see, I just put it in there. And now it's important to blend some of the edges here. So I'm just gonna go back with a damp brush like this, just to make sure it's not too abrupt of a change, and then continue pulling the paint here. Now I'm going much faster than I would normally, just because I want to have this as a quick demo. Okay, you can definitely work at a slower pace than this. I'm just kind of rushing it just a little bit. And let's blend this area. I find that with these kinds of shapes, sometimes you want to blend only one side. So for example, this seems like the right place to blend, and this one I'll leave a little more prominent. Okay, it really depends on the specific situation. So now I'm going to pull some shadows at the top or more upper area, right around here. So there's a strong shadow behind, kind of under the stem here, another one that pulls back here near the bases, and I'm really showing you how this can be done fairly easily and in a simple and quick manner. Okay, and you can already see the definition of the shadow. Of course, you can define some of these lines here, but this is basically it, and you see you get a much more interesting shadow, and not just a boring repetition of the same kind of color or tone, if you get what I mean. I think we also need to add just a little bit more shadow to the top once again, so maybe around these areas like this can be really magical. That's pretty much it. So you can see how the kind of a purple-ish color looks on top of orange. Before we move on to the next one, we actually have a good opportunity to get some shadows inside the shadow. So I'm going to try and do that very gently right now, just by adding some very light touches here around this area. So I'm following the contours of the different parts of the pumpkin, and you can see how it slightly blends in. The paint is a little too dry. If it was a bit more wet, it could have been perfect. but you can still see how some of it blends in like this. And then I can just take some, again, the damp brush and kind of blend these harsher areas in, and you get an even deeper shadow inside the shadow. Okay, so this is, I think, a really cool way of doing this. You always want to pay attention while you're doing that to the wet and wet, so I think this is a good extra tip here. Next up we have the avocado example. Let me rearrange stuff here. So now you get to see a little more of the palette, and we have two main colors here. We have the yellow in the middle and the green to the sides. I do think the greens need a little strengthening, so I may use just a bit of green here. But generally speaking, for the green we'll have just the opposite of the apple, so we'll have some red, and for the yellow we'll have kind of a bluish color to shadow with. Okay, so I'm gonna just use a mix of the two, and the first thing here is we have an inner shadow around this area. So I'm just gonna use some blue for that, and I'm gonna use it pure. On purpose I don't really wanna mix it. Now, of course, the blue is kind of an arbitrary choice. You can definitely use other colors, and I may find that I need to kind of gray it a bit using red. Just a little bit of red. That's too much red. So just a little bit like this, and even maybe adding a bit more yellow to it, just to make it a little duller. So I'm basically using a gray that's dominant by blue. Okay, now this is the darkest area here, and I'm gonna use again a damp brush to bring that into the rest of the inner area, so that I have a softer shadow. Now sometimes when you do that you'll lose the darkness of this part, so I'm gonna go back, take a bit of a darker mixture here, and just go wet and wet and put it inside into the wet wash, maybe a bit of red. This red is really dominant, so you just touch it and it really influences and dominates your mixture. But anyway, now you get a nice little blend here. And adding this kind of small touch here really helps. So for this bottom part, I'm going to use a more red dominated mixture. So I just added a bit of red here. And I'm just going to go around here. I will later on connect it to the circular kind of area. So what we have here is the darker part of the avocado because of the peel, and then under it we have a cast shadow that's, funny enough, is lighter. Okay, so I'm just gonna get that, and you know what, I'll wait with the contour. I'm thinking if I should just go at it or wait, but I think I'll wait just a bit. So anyway, I'm putting this almost black dark mixture, and this part is a little more blue, so I'm gonna clean the brush, bring a little more blue to the mix, and keep it a little wetter, the mixture, so now it's a little lighter as well. I'm just gonna go like this and add that shadow in. Okay, like this. Now this is really, there's not enough red, generally speaking, in this to make it really a complementary kind of shading, so I can just take a bit more pure red and kind of just put it into this area, and I think it will add a lot of interest here. I hope the colors come through well in the camera. I may even add a bit here. They may not come through perfectly, so apologies about that. And then I'm going to take some of the green I used to actually paint the avocado, add the red to it, and work on the contours or the peel of the avocado using that. Okay. And you can see, if it comes through the camera, you can see that this has a bit of a red tint to it. Okay. Now the one thing I want to do is there is a bit more of a dark exterior layer around the avocado, so I want to get that in as well. So what I'll do is I'll clean the brush, grab a little more blue and yellow, so I'm basically remixing the red from the green, sorry, from earlier. And it's a bit of a dirtier green because it has some red in it. And then I'm just going around here. And let me just make this mixture even wetter. This has nothing to do necessarily with the shading using complementaries, but it's just what I see in the reference. The exterior is much darker, and this is done using I think it should be done using actually green because it's really close to what I see. So anyway, like this, and I'm going rough on purpose because you'll see what I'm gonna do in a moment. I'm just gonna use a damp brush to blur it all together. So I'm just, maybe even a wetter brush. I'm just gonna, it all basically comes down to the water and pigment ratio, water and paint ratio. So the moment you have more control over that is when it becomes much easier to get these blendings happening in the right way, in the right consistency. So it's really all about that. And this one's pretty much done. Let me zoom out so that you can see all of the 3 examples. So here they are. I hope you enjoyed this demo, and you see I was very quick and loose with it. Of course, if we take our time and really work slowly on each one and work stage by stage. By the way, like the apple that I painted for you, I worked here much more patiently and slowly, but here I just wanted to give you the general idea of shading with the complementaries, or not with the same tones, I guess, or not with the same color. So hopefully this makes it clearer. Here we had the red, we used a bit of a green, and then just a bit of blue here. For the orange we used some purple or violet or whatever you want to call it, and for the green we used exactly the opposite, we used red. So I hope this is helpful. Let's change the angle and wrap up this video. So friends, I hope you enjoyed this video. Here's once again a look at the final results. I'm really pleased with this one in terms of the colors and just the way I blended some parts of it and left some parts more blunt and more of a bold change. The apple as well, it's the same apple I showed you in the tutorial in the full painting process, so that's nice. There's the avocado that turned out really cool with the red. And this just gives you another angle at shading. Okay, so if you've been always or up to this point shading using the same color, maybe consider trying out a different color, maybe even not a color that's traditionally complementary to the color you used. You can definitely test out a lot of different things and see what works for you. For example, I used blue to shade the red, and these aren't complementaries, they're just primaries. So you can definitely use a wide variety of options to decide how to shade something. Okay, so I really hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel here if you still haven't, and also check out my Instagram and Snapchat, everything in the description box. If you want to see these different works step by step, I take a lot of pictures of them and you can see the process, you can see my daily life, where I'm going, what I'm doing, you can follow me around. And this is it. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you again in another one really soon.